Hello, everyone, and welcome to our February edition of Always on the Ride, a live webinar slash podcast where you get to hear conversations with me and amazing people talking about art, writing, social science, music, politics, dead hamsters. Um, I'm thinking about dead hamsters only because I had a long conversation about when I was Mormon and my hamster died, Jerry Lee Lewis, and I was wondering whether or not he was going to go to Mormon heaven. That's probably a different episode, where you get to hear conversations about all kinds of random things, many of them anthropological in nature, and many of them political slash cultural. All of that being said, I am incredibly excited to have Karen Russell with us here today. Karen is the author of many books, novels, and collections of short stories, including The Amazing Orange World, Swamplandia, Vampires in the Lemon Grove, and then the reissue of Sleep Donation, which I accidentally used as a coaster, which now it has like a weird wrinkle in it, which maybe diminishes the value of the autograph version. So Karen is also my favorite MacArthur Genius Fellow, and all around wonderful, hilarious person. And budding snow sledder, as I've been learning as of late. So welcome, Karen. I'm excited to talk to you. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm being raptured. Maybe to Mormon hamster heaven. That was such a generous introduction, and I still feel so badly that I'm not your hamster. I feel like that would be the most amazing guest for this webinar. So many questions would be answered, and
what's
it
it like
really
up
so
there?
Nice to see you. It's suddenly been a long time. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see each other even in shadow casting reality. I was excited when I thought you might come to Astoria. I thought we could like wave at each other from like the haunted coast.
I know. I'm still optimistic that that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So how is your quarantine, your pandemic going?
I mean, right now, when I'm alone in my house, I feel like I'm levitating slightly. Like if you could see my lower body, I would just be kind of like a few feet off my chair. It's such a funny thing to it's a very contradictory time, right? I really miss being indoors with friends and touch and these very basic, miraculous things that I felt like I was took for granted absolutely this time a year ago. And then at the same time, when you're in a house with young kids, it's like you feel like a lottery winner if you get to be alone for half an hour.
Yep.
It's amazing. I mean, you might get a glimpse of them. They'll probably come back here because this is indeed where they live. So
sure, yeah, they have a key.
But it's just so quiet. It's so quiet. I don't know. I think like our kids, our little girl's 1, and she's like just become mobile. And I sort of watch her. I don't know if you had this experience with your guys. It's like the amount of failure that she experiences on a daily basis. Like, do they process pain differently? I mean, it's really just like Looney Tunes all day long. And as an adult, if I had to deal with that staggering amount of failure, I would just give up. I'd be like, just cart me around in the wagon, Mom. Like, I'm not very good at this,
Well, at least you don't have the shame of when you go to like a grocery store and you're carrying around a kid and they just got like a fucking Easter egg on their forehead or a black eye, and you're like, I didn't do it. Like they're just they're clumsy as shit. Like he's a maniac.
I know. This was in the old times pre-corona, but I remember my son fell through the bleachers. Like I was letting him kind of walk up and down, and he just like fell through, and the entire baseball team gasped. And I was like, take a load off, gentlemen. Like he's fine. This is like bleeding in the dirt.
Yeah.
Like, he's fine.
The skulls are still soft. It's fine. It's
That's a nice change, I think, from 1 to 2. I feel like with our daughter, I just have a lot more faith that she'll live through the night and survive, most falls, which is a nice change.
Oh, we got the kids are not here right now, but one of them is walking around. It looks like like Cyclops. I mean, or like whatever. When you have 3 eyes, basically, he's got this huge bump on his forehead from jumping on the couch.
Well, I remember you telling me that when you have two, they can sort of reenact their favorite fight scenes together. And I believed you. And I was like, but that's probably way down the road. And not at all. Like they're already picking up sticks and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
like the baby is like vicious, she gives as good as she gets. And
Um,
well, I don't know. Uh,
yeah, that's how we are. The small one is really the scary one. Um, he's like, I don't know if you've ever seen uh, Matt. Is it Mad Max, the second one with the
oh
feral
yeah.
the feral kid with the boomerang?
Yeah.
It's basically that. And actually, he went like as that kid for Halloween one year, or at least I made him dress up like that. But total like wild
Okay.
hair and just like wearing like animal skins. I don't know where he got those from, but just maniac style.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it kind of reassuring too. I remember a friend telling me, like, if you just have one kid, you're a geneticist, but if you have two, you're a behaviorist. And it kind of takes some of the pressure
Uh-huh.
off because you
Yeah,
just see, like, I guess you're the sociopath and
yeah.
and you're the bookworm.
Uh, so how's the work going? Is that a bad question to ask?
It's so funny. I just got a questionnaire about this, which was like, I was sort of it's always flattering that anyone sends you anything. I mean, I'm flattered to get robocalls, whatever, but they were like, tell us about creativity during the pandemic. And I was just thinking about actually how much creativity goes into parenting, sort of like it's a really unsung deal, but it does require a lot. I mean, there's so many hours in the day. And to live in like a 5 block radius around your house in the winter with little kids, I hope like if we carry a lesson forward, it's like, oh, this, and teachers too, right? I think everybody is reckoning with um, this sort of like, yeah, the everyday creativity of educating young children.
Yeah,
I'm not very good at it, but I feel like a lot
yeah,
of my energy has been sort of siphoned off in that direction. I'll show you, like, I mean, come on. It didn't come like that in the box. I also am like ready to like, burst the myth of Santa. My son's like, the
yeah,
elves made that. I'm like, no, they didn't, son.
yeah.
There's no such thing. It was me, your loving mother. Like, I don't want Santa to get the credit. I'm like, that
Yeah,
shit was expensive and it took
yeah,
hours to put together. um no, but I also feel like now I a little bit, our daughter's a little bit older, I think I'm finding my way back into writing, but I think a lot of fiction writers I know when this began felt like their antenna were snapped off. I
no,
don't know if that was your experience too. It was such a kind of like, I feel like we were also riveted to the present moment in a way. And just such a low sky of anxiety to be under. It made it harder to sort of, um, you know, but then I know other people who really, really like threw themselves into creative projects during this time. Like I think a lot of books were born and completed too. So but just locally, I wouldn't say this has been my most prolific
Mm,
season.
yeah. Well, I think when I remember when we all kind of went into the stay at home orders, and people were posting stuff like, "Can't wait to be so productive," and I'm just like, you guys are fucking sociopaths. I don't, the fact that like,
Yeah.
you know,
I have that read a little bit too, or if especially, I mean, maybe now things are starting to shift and change, I pray, but if you weren't sort of scalded by the suffering, by this misery around you, I don't know.
no,
Um, yeah, you would, yeah, if you sort of went into your nuclear bunker when this began, that would have surprised me, right? Because I think if anything, everyone is so aware that we're so interdependent now.
yeah,
It's such a visceral reminder of that you really can't wall yourself off from other species, other people, you know.
yeah, yeah. I feel like I started working on a book last March of last year. Like that's I stopped. I was not teaching for the quarter, starting in the spring. I started working on a book, and I think it probably wasn't until October that I felt like I actually started writing something. So
Right.
I spent 7 months um, spinning my wheels, drinking, keeping kids alive, reading, but not really feeling very inspired. And, you know, and it took a while for me to feel okay with that. Like, to
Yeah.
be like, just because I'm at home doesn't mean that I have to be productive. There's lots of things to do around the house that need to be done, and lots of other things that are
Yeah.
more important than productivity.
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of the same where you sort of realized it was like this great uncontrolled experiment where the wheels of capitalism stopped. And so people have some time maybe to reflect on how demented and unsustainable like a economic system that is based on just unregulated growth truly is,
Yeah.
and like you internalize that stuff. I think even as like a crazy person who takes dictation from ghosts for a living, still I feel those like puritanical boot heels, like just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, it's just, which is especially nuts if, it, and I feel like people forget that, some of the best discoveries come from just kind of playing around in the dark. It's not always this sort of, um, forward grind of, you know, like
No.
that there's something kind of paradoxically useful about non-utilitarian motion and like take, and also the kids remind me of that because there is so much value to just being with them, like on the carpet, like being with them. And I think sometimes at the end of the day, I'll be like, well, I've accomplished nothing, but I am so exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's only because I'm using probably the wrong metrics to think about accomplishment.
Are you finding that all of this like prolonged, like all day long contact with the kids is inspiring certain kinds of themes or stories? I mean, I bring that up only because I just reread Orange World, which I think everybody should read, especially people with kids, mothers. But I'm just wondering what, like, if you're seeing anything like that happen now, any kind of
Yeah.
inspiration or things that you're noticing that you think are gonna show up later on.
Yeah. I love this is how Jason and I became friends. I read that story and he had little kids too. And this was when I just had one. And I think I still had this false idea that I would somehow get back to something. And Jason disabused me of that in a kind way and was like, just keep walking through the Stargate,
Yeah.
that's the wrong preposition, but just keep moving and you'll
No.
get to somewhere new. Like there's no back to anything. You probably won't sleep for 5 years, but that's fun. That's so funny to remember that. I think there's a little bit of a jet lag. Do you find that in your work? It takes a while sometimes for the to process something and for it to kind of show up in some conjugated way. I don't know. I don't right now. I sort of feel like once again, a lot of my imagination is going towards like it's just been co-opted by these boring rehearsals for disaster, So I'll
Yeah.
be like, oh no, like the baby's on the stairs. Oh my God, the baby's on a treasure hunt for fatally small objects again. Like that's just like such a boring use of the imagination to just
No.
like rehearse for 100 deaths a day. I've been reading this book and that was one of my favorite lines. It's these two people, like a cab driver and a 9-year-old woman. They really love each other. But the most frequent manifestation of that love is that they're both always worried the other one's dead. Like he'll show up 5 minutes late. She's like, oh, I thought you were dead. He's like, I was thinking the same thing about you. Like that just seems to be a lot of like the Valentines they give to each
Oh,
other.
that's amazing. What book is that?
Oh my God, you would love it. I should get it and read you a paragraph. This book was written for you. It's called The Last Taxi Driver by Lee Durkee. I actually, because I knew we were going to talk, let me see. I have like my stack because I'm so brain dead. Oh no, is it not here? It's so good. He says that the taste of grief is a thin crust Pizza Hut pizza, which yeah, I got it. Isn't that, what could be truer?
Oh, that's
The Last
amazing.
Taxi Driver. I got it. Is that okay? Because this is for you. I think he wrote this passage for you. Let me see. Um, gosh. Yeah, this is Anna, this like older woman who he's sort of driving around. Let me see. And right before that, he drops off a man. He does a lot of hospital pickups. It turns out he just talks about how people, I think I love it because it's just so kind of episodic and you get to eavesdrop on people in a cab, which none of us have been able to do
Yeah.
on self-consciousness for a year. but also it really gets into some dark stuff. It's super funny, but the people who are taking the last cab around are not, they're kind of limping in there, they're not,
Sure.
no one is just like throwing gold in the air as they get into this cab. Sure enough, Cancer Max forgot his pizza. You might wonder, do I take the pizza back to his motel? No, I do not. Instead of doing the decent thing, I sit there in the parking lot of the urgent care and I wolf down a slice. Sorry, dying of cancer guy, but that's my rule. Anything left in my cab that isn't a cell phone or a wallet is a tip. Cell phones and wallets we take to the police station. Everything else we keep. This is the tip you didn't give me, cancer dude, except you did subconsciously, man. You tipped me this pizza for unloading your luggage twice after enduring a hideous story about genital warts that will haunt me forever. I take another bite and chew it down. It's cardboard cold Pizza Hut thin crust, and it tastes like grief. And then what I also appreciate is the next chapter. You're like, how far ahead in time is this guy gonna rocket launch us?
Yeah.
And it's just not the suspense I was expecting. It just picks right up. This pizza, man, this pizza has done me no favors.
All right. I'll put that
Anyway,
on my list.
I think you'll love that book.
Oh, excellent. Well, I was thinking, so this book has just been reissued or in paperback version.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
It's true.
But you wrote this a while ago, right? Sleep Donation.
Yeah, I wrote that in 2014, and I will say it has been like a weird experience to relaunch it because obviously I didn't anticipate, putting out. It's about an epidemic of insomnia, and the nation's sleep supply becomes tainted with a nightmare. So then there's sort of like this secondary epidemic of rumor and panic, and sort of nightmares being transmitted from one dreaming body to another. And I think at the time when I was writing, I was really interested in kind of, this sort of the global acceleration of our time and the way that we're all connected, but primarily sort of via the internet. I wasn't like, none of us saw this time coming. So I think the super weird thing for me about putting this book out now, I remember it has illustrations, which was the best part. I think my goal now is just to like cut out the middleman and like pay people to draw what's in my mind. I'm like, oh, this is much better than. And there were these amazing like Italian artists, and they were working on. I thought it was going to be really funny, which seems insane now, but I was like, we're going to do like a riff on one of these CDC brochures, and it'll be, for people who have these contagious nightmares, like if you have the same dream in a 72-hour period, drive yourself to a sleep quarantine station. If you see like a glowing jellyfish, like to me, this was somehow very funny. And then like, obviously this joke falls flat in 2021, so amid the many of the many things, like very low on the list, but I was like sort of bummed that what I thought was my great whimsical joke has been.
Well, I think I've really enjoyed reading it this year. I think that, and I was thinking about it, like, it reads so differently now, I'm sure, than it did, in 2014. Yeah. But in so many ways, like I think about the role of capitalism in like the vaccines, who's getting help, who's, there's a lot of stuff in this book, I think that really speaks to things that we are living through in this moment.
I hope so. It's disorienting a little bit to read. I'm not sure if you've had that experience of going back to older work, and it's a weird vertigo, isn't it? You sort of don't necessarily recognize the person that made those sentences or had those interests.
Yeah.
But and I wrote it before kids too, so I feel like it's a cruel joke. I was like, that dumbass thought she knew about insomnia. What a fool, like even reading it, like there's some lady who's like, she got like 4 hours of sleep, and I'm like, shut up, lady. Yeah. Like that's like, just don't brag. And also I was like, the perfect sleep donor in that book is this little baby, which again struck me somehow as funny in some dark ass Jonathan Swift way, because I think it does literalize something that just happens where, this economy is running on the dreams of children. Like you understand we are literally like siphoning up all of the, uranium, where like the air here a few months ago was unbreathable. And so it's very visceral for me in a way it wasn't actually when I wrote this. I think now when I there was a month where I walked into my baby's room and it had like filled up with toxic smoke, and the bill came due for us sooner maybe than I would have anticipated in 2014,
No.
And it's true, like all the, I was just thinking when you were talking about Florida earlier, I don't know if you saw those women in Florida who like dressed up like the Golden Girls to beat the line for the vaccine.
No.
Well, there is this, I mean, it's, it's just like,
Oh, I feel like in Florida
I don't
too,
know.
when the pandemic happened, there were kids who were dressing up like their grandparent, like their grandma, but they had the mask on. They could go buy beer,
Oh yeah.
but with with like grandma's with grandma's ID, but you couldn't tell that it wasn't. It was like so. Yeah, Florida. I mean, and
I,
even this, I mean, the book even has, it's got a little bit of everything, right? It has the kind of deniers of people
mhm.
who don't think it's an issue. It's of course got the people who are making money off of this whole thing. Yeah, it's as I was reading it, I mean, I was wondering, I mean, but this had already been slated to come out for how long? I mean, a year before.
Yeah. I think we decided to put it out in paperback in 2018, when I sold Orange World. So it had been kind of on the tarmac for a while. So it was like a strange bounce where these amazing designers, and I will say we had a little bit of a language barrier, which was also hilarious. Like our correspondence is all me being like, is the crucifix too photorealistic in this like John Carpenter collage? And then being like, we feel it is not, or like, no, or me being like, do you think the jellyfish dream should primarily afflict the mid-Atlantic states? And they're like, we put it in the Midwest, just like, I don't know. So that was so fun. And then all of a sudden they're like, we can't work on this because we're all under lockdown now, It hit, it was that kind of surreal time where even though I think that was a real lesson to me too, Jason, is just how bad humans are at predicting, even though so much of our mental life is spent anticipating and hoping and fearing, but in some way running these scenarios so much of the time. And, it just, I think also our sort of inability, I feel like this with death, I guess, is the most obvious example, but like really like being born to fail to imagine certain outcomes. So we saw what was happening in Italy, and like very few people here at that time thought that we'd be in the same place, right?
No.
And I remember I was in Texas for Hurricane Harvey, and I don't know why this has come back to me a lot during this period, but this journalist talking about how maybe because he was a journalist, he felt sort of molded by his profession. It made him feel a little bit safe. And watching his neighbor's house flood, watching them have to go up to their roof because of the floodwaters, and just somehow still like pitying them, right? Feeling badly for them, but not being able to inhabit the future, not being able to understand that water was going to rise into his house next.
Yeah.
Really in like some physical way, it just didn't compute for him. And I'm like, you hope that art helps people to get there, but we're just not great at that very simple substitution algebra, of empathy.
Yeah. I mean, people go, oh, that's what happens in New York. That's never going to happen here, right? Or LA.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida might have some weird immunity because of all the stuff that Florida's doing. So maybe that's part of it. But
well, it was strange to see the map last week, right? Where it was just like this polar ice had covered most of the states, and then Florida was just like in its eternal happy hour.
Yeah.
Like, we can't hear you over a jacuzzi suit.
Yeah.
Good luck out there. I don't know. Can I ask, because I was thinking about you. I mean, in the summer, I got to participate in Hostile Terrain, and it was like unbelievably moving. But I was thinking about you coordinating this wide scale project sort of virtually.
Yeah.
That seems very challenging, my friend.
It has been. We have a good team, Nicole, who you met, and Austin, and then there's Gabe. They have been really kind of at the forefront of trying to find ways to keep people engaged virtually. And then a lot of our hosting partners also, came up with really great ideas for getting people involved. But we're still anticipating, we've got probably over 100 shows that will happen physically once things are sort of back to normal. And so everyone's kind of in a holding pattern. But I am anticipating coming up to the Pacific Northwest and, hopefully being in Portland and in Seattle for some of those shows.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, everybody's had to just like everything. How do we keep going in this kind of new virtual
or
world?
you're planning, speaking of planning, you have to plan for 3 different
Yeah,
futures or
for sure.
three
For
different
sure.
contingencies.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, at least I've been asking writers this lately, and that, and I just read the Willie Walton, the new book. We had him on the show last month, and it's great. You'll love it. It's very Portland-esque. Um,
I hear I hear the diner at the end of my street makes a cameo, the original Pancake House.
yes,
All
yeah,
right. It's like the
yeah.
best eavesdropping
Yeah,
down there.
and Willie's very good about writing place. I mean, there's tons of references to someone from Portland would pick up all these kinds of little details.
Yeah.
But I was talking to him, and others, and I'm always just curious, like, do you have a writing routine, like when you like kind of get into a place or a zone, or do you have like this is how I get into this my space, whether physically or sort of mentally?
I used to be, before kids, I used to be like a maniac. When I wrote that first draft of Sleep Donation, I feel like I was just myself. Like I just had a very few responsibilities. I'm sure all my plants were dead, like yeah, I was living in like weird illegal sublets, and I had just sort of arranged my life around writing. I would do these kind of visiting, I would do whatever purchased time for me to write. So I sometimes miss that freedom to just um you know yeah, just sort of like pull an all-nighter. Now
Yeah,
if there's, I'm sure you too, I feel like now I pull all-nighters, but it's just like uh
go to sleep.
oh god, yeah, just to help kids. Like you have to go so far down on the ladder rung to like release them into the sea,
Yeah,
like I feel like
yeah,
my son knows if I'm even like a little bit lucid, he's like, come down farther with me into the dark waters. um so that's right, it's a different kind of all-nighter. So now I really try, I've been trading off time with my husband, which is a real gift. And like, I don't know if you find this, I feel like it's got to be in the morning, and sometimes if you're really hot on something, I can pick it up at night again, but usually for me it's like maybe 4 hours in the morning, and then I switch over to mom mode.
yeah.
And I feel very like totally insanely lucky to have that ability and time. Like, I don't know, does that true for you? I feel like 12 to 3 p.m. Who is doing any kind of creative work well then?
No.
Like the shadowless hours are just not that great. They're good
Yeah,
for like, paying your mortgage or
yeah. Email. Yeah,
email. Yeah. But 12 to 3, all like the ghosts go away. If you can, I once did a fellowship in Berlin, and I realized like being 6 hours ahead of the US was such a gift. Like somehow having the jump on all the other consciousnesses firing on, and
yeah,
like people knowing your name and making demands of you, it was
yeah.
so great. So I just sort of think morning and evening are the good, the haunted times.
Yeah. It's funny. Willie was saying that he's like, I don't have a any kind of strategy at all, because I think when he really started writing, he was a house painter, and so he was like, I just learned how to write whenever I had like like 45
Okay.
minutes. So like get in the car and I have my laptop, or
Yeah.
an hour here, an hour there. But I feel like for me it's very much like 9 to 1. Try to
Yeah.
squeeze in if I can squeeze in lunch,
Yeah.
and even half of that is either reading something else or listening to music or going for a walk. And then I feel like
Yeah.
out of the 3 to 4 hours, I probably get a good hour and a half where I feel like I'm actually doing
Actually
something.
in it. Totally. I had a friend who would say it was like the last 15 minutes.
Yeah,
He treated it like, he was like, you just got to push for that last 15 minutes.
yeah,
It's like, don't leave. Like, because that's when you start to get over the hurdle of your perfectionism or procrastination or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
And I feel like without deadlines, I'm sure there's a gentler way to do it, but thank God for deadlines, because you just need that donkey kick of terror sometimes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. If you're a student watching this, you're so lucky because you have these sort of artificial deadlines, and then
Yeah.
you just have to run through the jungle. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I'd also, I hadn't written for a couple of years. I was doing all this exhibition stuff, and I kept telling myself, "Oh, I'm just going to let these ideas percolate, and then it'll just all come flowing out of me once I sit down in front of a computer," and being like, "Oh no, that's actually a muscle that I have to. That it's like atrophied because I haven't been using it. And so
Totally. I have that too, where you're just like a flabby person on the bike,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's like I'm gonna get there, but I felt like 7 months of being frustrated. Um, I feel like now I'm frustrated in a different way, but at least words are coming out, and
Yeah.
every 20th word I'm like, oh, that one's okay, that one can stay. But
Yeah. I used to tell students, which was a disgusting analogy, like very New York analogy, that like, I was like, sometimes the water just runs brown until it runs clear. And they were like, you should talk to your landlord. Like, oh, Karen, that's you shouldn't be doing that.
one of the
Are you, oh,
oh no, go
I
ahead,
was going to ask, because I know this book, I think you mentioned to me that you have like sort of different ideas about it, that it's not quite as academic. I mean, I think your first book it reads like a novel to me, but that it's going to be a slightly different animal.
Yeah, it's much more like a novel than the first one, which is both fun to write but also kind of terrifying, because I feel like I'm going off into a world that I've been trained for so long to be a shitty writer. Being an academic, you're trained to be a terrible fucking writer, and then now I'm trying to do something that actually requires better writing, and it's a little scary.
Oh,
But
I bet it's both. I remember sort of I dated historian of science, and just looking at like the footnotes, it was like,
yeah,
but it was such a like a strange, like Freudian kind of move, where you had to be like, I wanted to thank my doctor father who I'm about to eviscerate for being
yeah,
so wrong that I can now stand on his crushed skull. And
yeah.
there's a lot, it was just a really lot of kind of deep stuff happening in those footnotes.
Yeah, this is a book that will have very few footnotes and references, which I'm increasingly okay with.
I
But
think it's
it's
great.
it's definitely outside of my comfort zone.
I was just rereading. I love her stuff so much. Avery Gordon, the guy who wrote
Yeah,
Ghostly Matters that we've
yeah,
talked
yeah.
about, and just sort of this like mold breaking work of sociology that's just chock-a-block with ghosts and fragments, and it's just a different kind of truth that you
Yeah.
can communicate. But
Well, speaking of ghosts, I was sort of wondering a couple things about your writing. One, when did you realize that you were very funny? And then when did that start to kind of like, were you always writing things? Has writing always had this kind of this as much humor as it currently does?
oh, I'm so glad it is humor for you. I feel like that's really anybody. It's that old 70-30 ratio. I wish you could meet my siblings. I'm like the least funny person in my family by a lot, and always losing the joke of the year competition. I feel
Uh,
they're funny, and they're like much meaner than I am. I'm not saying it's always correlated, but
yeah.
I think they're just like, yeah, better at deadpan, crueler.
Sure.
I think like I probably observed my parents like last rays of hope in the project, like I'm the oldest, and I
Yeah.
like and all of their attention. I see that now with my kids. I'm like, oh, birth order has a lot to do with what kind of special monster you become, right?
Yeah.
Where like, yeah, my daughter is just like putting her own boots on and,
Yeah.
like, just, like, carving herself a steak, like she's,
Yeah.
So yeah, I try. I mean, I try, because I think the world is such a dark place, and my own inclinations can be kind of dark.
Yeah.
But a monotone darkness just never feels true to me. How sort of absurd and amazing this place also is. And I think my favorite writers and people and artists all have humor shot through their work, and there's something so generous about that. I love this guy Jim Shepard. He has a book called Phase 6. It's talk about vertigo. He wrote it before this pandemic, but it's about permafrost thawing and a pathogen being released from some like the throat of some ancient goose.
Yeah.
And now everyone's dying. It's like a domino rally of grandfathers. It's like a very grim book, but he is so funny. And the humor, it feels so generous,
Yeah.
and it feels like he has such an eye for like what makes humanity worth saving and the humor is a big part of that. I also just feel like, in middle school, you quickly discover that you're going to need some strategy to like to make it out alive. I mean, I'm not saying it's all generosity.
Yeah.
Maybe you're like just an acne crossing guard and you're like, oh my God.
What's
I
my
gotta
angle?
figure something out.
Oh. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things I really love about is, I mean, like a book like Swamplandia, it has this mix of just like, it gets very dark, and then there's also, and then but the narrator just sort of is just pulling you along as well and helping you feel okay about the darkness. And
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. Because I do think, it comes from the same source sometimes, right? I feel like a howl, maybe it's a howl of laughter, but it's just a howl of pain sometimes that someone's alchemizing, right? Or it's like whatever is so outrageously sad, or absurd. Like there's a way where I think laughter also can spade those. I'm being very inarticulate now, but in the way that if you go to a comedy show and everyone's laughing, often it's like one of the darkest truths has been exhumed and presented to you, and you need to ventilate that horror from your body.
Yeah.
But to do it together is also like, it's a way of acknowledging something that can be really unspeakable in other registers, And I think there's a reason. It's like also everyone's so uncomfortable with looking at some of their own complicity in these terrible systems. Laughter can help. It helps me to do that, to say, oh my, this is, even this little baby with a helmet where they're like taking the dreams out of her. I mean, sometimes depending on your vantage, that can seem really completely upsetting and monstrous to me, or sort of funny in a terrible way, because it's a way to say like, this is what the world runs on. This is our diesel here, I don't know.
I mean, I think for me, the thing that always gets me with your writing is when I always love the narrator. We get these like really absurd things that aren't, that are like, are sort of seemingly absurd, but then you're like, oh wait, no, this is actually like, when it's presented this way, it seems like, oh, that's not how it is, or that doesn't happen like that. But then you're like, oh no, actually that is, that is how it happened. The thing
I think fantasy, some people will kind of dismiss it. And I'm like, no, it's just a way of confronting something that you've become totally blind to in your everyday, in your kind of sleepwalking through your Wednesday. And I feel like writing it helps me to wake up a little bit too. I was thinking about, I know you read and loved Cruddy, which I think is one of the darkest, one of the saddest books I've ever read. And like one of the funniest also. And it just keeps toggling like a holograph the whole time.
It's amazing. I mean, I was thinking, there's a scene in the story Orange World where she goes to the like mom group, and I think that's just like this amazing like collection of just these moms that I kind of that I'm like, oh, I know that mom, and I know that mom, and I've heard that conversation, and I've had to listen to someone's take on this thing, and then the narrator says something like, what is it? Oh, like, don't worry, baby, this is just anthropology, and I love. I mean, but just like that group seems so absurd, and yet completely believable on so many levels.
I'm glad. It's true though, right? I do really miss eavesdropping, because it's one of the things about sledding. I don't know why this stayed with me. I thought it was like the truest thing I've heard in 2021. It was like just a ship of fools, it really looked like people were just riding down on like barbecue lids and like whatever they could find, and just salvaging broken parts of other sleds, like Oregon Trail style. And you like rotate backwards, you're just sort of like, well, I guess I just surrender. And this little boy was like, Daddy, I'm going to hit people and they're going to hit me. And he was just like, everybody is in everybody's way, son. Find a spot that works for you. And I was like, nothing I ever come up with will be as profound as what this father has just said.
That's amazing.
I was like, everybody is in everybody's way most of the time.
There's several Instagram accounts that are called like shit overheard in LA or shit overheard and I feel like that reminds me a lot of your writing, of just these snippets of things that like
Portland is so good that way.
I
did hear somebody, she was like, my spiritual practice was Wicca because I wanted to manipulate people into falling in love with me. Like, wait, what? I'm like, at least you know yourself, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that a spiritual practice?
Uh,
Is it working? Like,
yeah, yeah.
I
Asking for a friend.
totally. Mhm.
So you early morning writing. What about the editing process? What does that look like for you?
Oh, well, I made the great decision of marrying a book editor.
Mm.
But that's also been a little complicated at times. And we're sort of discovering, like, I'm not sure who your early readers are. For a while, yeah, I would sort of show him everything. And then I realized there's certain stages of a project where it's just bad.
Yeah.
Objectively, it's just really bad. But you're not, maybe if you hear that, I would give him this sort of like impossible demand. I'd be like, please be brutally honest with me, but tell me it's perfect.
Yeah.
He was like, well, this is not good for the health of our marriage. So I've sort of, it's a funny thing though, I sort of missed in my graduate school days, I had a cohort of readers. And I think now people's lives are so, they have all kinds of demands on their time. So it's harder sort of to say like, hey, can I take a big gator chomp of your daylight? Here's my messy ass draft. But I do have, I'll show my agent, and she's very, very honest, painfully honest sometimes. I used to show my brother, who's also a writer, and I think now we just sort of root for each other, which is maybe better for siblings. But my siblings, for a long time, I think, because they're so deadpan and mean, we're great editors. My sister, not so long ago, was like, dear sister, stop writing about sisters, love your sister. Okay.
How many drafts do you go, like, how do you know, like what does that look like?
I think that's a good, this was a misconception of mine when I was a student. I was like, probably you arrive at a place, and maybe some writers do, where like you've finished something and you roll on the floor laughing, or I don't know, throwing confetti on yourself. And I feel like it's always just a capitulation,
Yeah.
It just feels like, I never have that sensation anyway, of rarely, maybe like often enough that then I'm like dissatisfied the rest of the time. But I think usually I feel like, well, this now it has a beginning, a middle, and an ending, and it's as close as I can get it to some final form. And now I know that I'm just dicking around and like changing scarlet to red. When you get to that place where you have actually memorized the thing you've made, and it sounds wrong to you if you make a change only because you have like become some Howard Hughes who's like so insulated themselves in this project. And at that place, then I'm like, I really need some feedback from others. And I wouldn't know how to do it without a consensus of editors, giving me some echolocation. And I thank God for editors, I think what I continue to be very bad at is knowing when I have this like tendency to sort of dark side. It's a little like Joe Biden. When he talks, I feel a real kinship with him, where he's like answering a question and everyone's like, Joe, are you coming back home? He's like gone around the dark side of the moon. And I feel like I really need help sometimes making things move in like a more, expediting a little bit, making things move more swiftly towards their conclusion, kind of tuning up the effects. I get really into like the Florida kudzu of metaphor, so I need somebody to come and help me with their machete, clear some of that away where it's not serving the story. And I don't always feel like I'm the best judge of when things are not explicit enough and when things are just where you're just kind of hammering something home to the reader. So that's really helpful, I think, because sometimes some of my best feedback, I don't know if you find this, it'll come from people who they're not writers, actually. They're just pure readers. And they just ask good questions. Yeah. They're not maybe attending to sort of like the micropulse of language, but they'll just say like, why would he do that? Or I don't understand this. And it's super helpful.
No. Have you been with, how many editors have you worked with through the course of your career? A lot of different editors, or?
Yeah, I've had really good experience. Different editors at different magazines. And then just my one book editor who's like my fairy godmother. And like, I have nightmares that I hope she lives for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I know. You've switched editors a couple times, or
I've just switched editors. Yeah. So I have a new editor now.
which it's a real trust fall, isn't it, to send
Oh
a new
yeah.
editor work?
And I haven't done that yet, but I had a conversation with a writer when I was trying to figure out which publishing house to go with. And one of the things that this person said to me, and this person has written lots of books and was very opinionated about what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And he of course it's a he said to me, you know, you don't ever want to go with an editor because, the editors can abandon you and et cetera, et cetera. But my whole thing was like, I need to like, for me, I need to trust the editor. And then everything else I hope will kind of work itself out. But without that, like I couldn't be this person who's like, oh, I'm just gonna, if you leave, we can just fill this spot.
Yeah.
That for me doesn't work.
Totally. No, it helps to specifically imagine a reader, doesn't it? I'm not sure
Yeah.
where that is,
Yeah.
but to move from like the general amorphous you, which is like just echoing in the cavern of your skull, to like a real human is helpful.
Yeah. And and I have an agent now, so that helps because I never want to like disappoint her. Right? It's always like, so it's good. It's good to have, to have those people who, who aren't just like some corporation that's going to help push this thing out into the world.
And someone who cares about you, right? I mean, thank God, because I feel like there's stuff that I'm so happy not to have published. I think we should give awards out for like people who prudently do not publish things. No. Also for fashion, like outfits you knew better than to wear outside. It would be like that. It'd be like the unpublished book of the year goes to this stinking load, like, wait, thank you so much for keeping that on your desktop and away from us,
Yeah.
Because that's a different skill set, I feel like my favorite edit that I've gotten back from Tony, my husband, recently, which was like, I just appreciated its economy. I feel like even my voicemails are way too long. He was like, more words, same probs. I was like, damn it.
So what else are you reading right now?
I just read, I'll show, this will be like the unboxing portion of the webinar. You mentioned, I think to me, did I make this up that you stalked Willie and that was how you became friends?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I stalked this woman. I sadly am not as close as you and Willie are, but she was very polite over email. Her name is Elia Dawn Johnson. She published this book called Reconstruction. Oh my gosh, you should. The title story is called A Guide to the Fruits of Hawaii, and it's about a vampire concentration camp. So that was the story I read where I was like, I must befriend this person. And that's it's an interesting index of your own delusion, where it's quite a one-way intimacy to love a story.
Yeah.
So convincing somebody over email that you're the same kind of freak. I'm sure I convinced her that I was a freak. Like, I think that might be as far as we got, but yeah, I love these stories. The title story is about a 19-year-old laundress in the Civil War. It's Black laundress, and I didn't even know how to describe it. She's a speculative fiction writer, and every single story I just thought was perfect and so upsetting and beautiful. If you're in like if you want to be just scared, and I don't if somehow that is a relief from just the low grade anxiety that many of us are feeling. Paul Tremblay. The Cabin at the End of the World. Just a lot of ritual murder in a cabin. But they're, these two dads take their daughter to a remote cabin, and people with like weird homemade weapons show up. And I think it was a good read for me at this moment, because you just are always living now I feel like many parents, right, where it's like what you wish were true and what's possible. So the dads keep promising their daughter that they're going to keep her safe, as it becomes increasingly clear that is absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
And that was like a real acute pain of that book for me. Do you know this guy? You would love him too. Stephen Graham Jones.
No.
I almost couldn't read this. This is like, makes me seem like a petty, small-hearted person, but it was just so good. Does that ever happen to you, where it was just, I felt like I just wanted to lay down in my casket or retire? I was like, well, I retire.
Had a good
Um,
run.
I feel like that would be a good blurb. I'm gonna be like, I
Yeah.
retire. Over passing
Uh,
the,
yeah.
it was just amazing. And it's yeah, these four friends kill an elk and then they're sort of haunted by this, but it becomes so much more about what it means to be an indigenous person in
Yeah.
America today, and the different kinds of betrayal that are possible, I guess, of your history and the way, how being betrayed kind of turns people into traitors. I don't know.
Yeah.
I loved it. And then this is my brother's book. I feel like if you're looking for a good Florida read, he walked the entire state of Florida. Um, and he just does he does a lot of anthropology, like very unrigorous and mostly
Yeah.
drunken anthropology of Florida. And he really gets sort of, I wish Joe Biden would read it. He gets a lot of the blue red switchbacks and like all the different Floridas inside that state.
Yeah.
Um, and when I asked him what the suspense was going to be, he was like, well, we have the highest number of vehicular manslaughter cases. I don't think that's what's going to keep the people turning the
Yeah.
pages. They're like, when's this guy going to get hit by a truck?
Oh
The
man.
second half is just white space, but it's a great book. One of the things when we were talking about the absurdities of capitalism, he gets into sort of in Miami Beach where they know that there's this sea level rise and these like acidifying oceans. The way that they're paying for these projects to combat sea level rise, it's exclusively through property taxes.
Yeah.
So it just feels a little,
Yeah.
it's just sort of like humans doing it wrong.com. Like that's, they're like, well, he's like, well, how are you going to combat climate change? They're like, whoa, we're going to tax all of this new development that we're encouraging.
Oh,
I
speaking of,
saw right on New Year's, I saw here in Portland, we live kind of like by this little wetlands. And there was like, it was more heron than I've ever seen, even in Florida. And I was like, oh my God, the animals have given up on us. They're just like, welcome to our summit, our 2021 summit. Like, it's just like a bunch of anarchist heron in Portland. They're like, okay, get it done.
Oh, that's amazing.
So you are homeschooling your kids and you're on leave. So does your life look a little bit like mine? You'll work in the morning and then kind of hop in and out.
Yeah. And just, try to get something good in the morning and then spend the rest of the day just goofing around.
Yeah. That part is so beautiful. I think it's confusing that I feel like now contradictory emotions are just my baseline state, where I'm like, this is such a gift to be with the kids this way. And also you're aware at every moment that there's a lot of suffering out there. Yeah.
And I also feel, that like, you've said this, like, with kids or just even in general, like I don't have the stamina that I used to have to like, when I was thinking about this current book project, when I was envisioning what it was going to look like, I was like, oh, when I wrote the first one, it just all flowed out, and every day I just walked around and I was thinking these amazing thoughts, and then I would put them to paper, and it was this wonderful experience. And then I got into writing, and I was like, what the fuck was I? No, like that didn't happen. Every day was a slog. I was always frustrated, a pain in the ass to be around, and now I just have less time to be frustrated and be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And my brain, I have less time, and also I think my brain is tired. And it's like, look, you get a couple of okay hours a day, and the rest of it is, is going to be something else.
Yeah, I wonder if I went through a period where I always feel pretty insecure, but I think I felt even more acutely so because we had gotten this major award, and I was like, now I need to figure out a way to make a sentence that saves humanity, or I had like a lot of froth and grandiosity that was whatever, entirely connected to my feelings of unworthiness and et cetera, all that boring stuff. But now I think a gift of the children, I just feel like severely reduced expectations. I'm like, could I write a sentence that's comprehensible? Like, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like now if like, if a book reviewer is like, this book sucked, I'd be like, but hey, they called it a book. So
yeah, they reviewed it.
yeah. Like, I don't, I think it's a healthier approach, maybe, because definitely there's something so deadly about trying to prove something to people or impress people. It's such a different energy than
Oh yeah,
communicating something, or it's just so different than the real spirit that you want to be writing from, which is not like to a jury of shadows.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
it's so funny. Yeah, I totally feel like that when you were saying, like, being like a flabby, being out of shape a little bit, like mentally out of shape. We got an exercise bike just because in Portland, this is very atypical. Usually we just wear our shrouds for 3 months of the year, and it rains without pause. And even just for mental health, I was like, I should try to move a little more. And like, I think I'm going to uncover some kind of Ishiguro like conspiracy where all of these Peloton instructors are robots. I mean, they can't be real human people, because they're like smiling and chatting with you while they're allegedly, I see what their feet are doing, and I'm like, this is so scary. How come more people aren't reporting on this cyborg nation? Like, it's going to be like my Battlestar Galactica or something, where I just go deep and find out that like Paley Fitness, it's just like a lot of robots from under the earth.
Yeah. No, I've become more active during the pandemic, but it's not in a fun way.
No, that's what I feel like. I'm learning that aging is just like your brain, your body, like it's just a soft puddle. Like it's like, and people don't really expect as much of you, which is kind of nice. I feel like my students now, like there was a time when I was just like, we're basically the same age demographic, and now I'm just like, knocking on heaven's door to them. They don't expect me to know much about the culture at all. They're like, all of her references stop like, with an Usher song in 2009. And now it's just.
I used to feel bad about that. Now I just roll with it. Be like, you know, um,
Oh.
sorry, I have a busy household here. Yeah, I've just completely given up on my references being relevant, and just be like, you don't know who Alf is? Fuck it. Like, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Even like Nirvana. I mean, there's so little now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I get like a little belligerent stand-up comedian about things like Alf. Like, they obviously just didn't watch enough television. I mean,
yeah. When I was a kid, right, it was watching TV. I don't think I ever drank water.
No, why would you? Gross.
Yeah, I mean, like the kids these days just don't know either how good they have it or how bad they have it. Like, I'm not quite sure.
We've just started going. I mean, some days it just rains all day, and I'm like, we have to go somewhere. So we've started going to like the McDonald's drive-through, which I'm not proud of. But sometimes I'll just listen to like a Louise Erdrich audiobook, and we'll just get a Happy Meal.
Yep.
And nothing I do could ever make my son as happy as the purchase of a Happy Meal. It like connects me to my own childhood,
Oh yeah.
He's so excited about these toys that are disintegrate in his hand,
Yeah.
And like there's like chicken that's like made of sugar and rubber. I don't. But it's
delicious.
He's so happy. Yeah, it's amazing. I know. I was thinking about that too. Just like or like eating Kool-Aid powder. Like I think I must have eaten like 32 quarts of Kool-Aid while watching The Price is Right, and that was just the summer,
Oh yeah. Pixie
and
sticks.
I think about it. It makes me feel better because like truly, my siblings and I, we're not perfect people, but we're not like killers,
Yep.
And so I'm like, sure, they're having some screen time, but did they just eat 32 quarts of like powdered Gatorade while watching while watching Cujo? No.
Yeah, no. So. Well, we're at our hour mark. I'm sad to say. But Karen,
we could have been eating Kool-Aid this whole time.
I know.
I'm kind of sad we just came to that.
Well, we'll have to have you back on this show soon.
Yeah. I think we should make a plan. I don't know how much time you want to give us, but we'll finish our books. We'll try to like time it, so then we can just have like a like a 1 hour rave or something.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just meet ourselves and rave for the hour.
Or we could just do a book club where we read other books that make us never want to write again.
Yeah.
Right?
The I retire blurb.
Yeah, they
Totally.
like, motherfucker. Damn you. Well, thank you so much. It's always wonderful to talk to you, to see you, and I hope that you guys are staying warm and safe over there and enjoying the sledding, and then I'll get to come party with you guys up in the haunted Pacific Northwest and the place where they filmed Goonies and Kindergarten Cop.
Oh yes.
Uh,
It's those
uh,
two important cultural
yes,
touchstones.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we're late. We're late for that party by like 100 years,
Yeah.
but let's. That sounds great. Well, thank you guys so much. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. We'll see you
Okay,
soon.
talk to you
Okay.
soon.
Bye.